All right. Well, welcome back to Tea Time with Teresa. Um, Today we're going to be discussing a book, the basically the life story of Georgia O'Keeffe. And did you read it, Sharon?
So I am on chapter 17. You're way farther than I am.
Oh, I finished it.
Oh, jeez.
Yeah, I finished it. Why don't you show everyone the cover? Because I can't
Okay.
quite remember the details of the cover. Yeah, Roxana Robinson, Georgia, A
Yes.
Life. I don't know if it's A Life, Georgia O'Keeffe, or Georgia O'Keeffe, A Life. I forget which one
Yes.
comes first, but it's aptly
So,
titled.
yes. And this is the back. I don't know if you can see.
That's her with her sister Ida.
Yes. So I listened to it mainly and I ordered this book.
Good.
So I go back and forth. And the reason I wanted the book, the physical book, was for the photographs.
Yes.
Yes, so I have both, do
And
both.
just a quick kind of disclaimer for our viewers. We're going to be just talking about our takes on this book as artists while we work. So if you want a more academic or professional overview of the book, in the sign up link, I gave out a bunch of museum
Mhm,
videos where the
mhm,
museums show you images of her work, and they do a very detailed, accurate overview of her work. We're just talking about it from an artistic point of view.
mhm.
And this is meant to be sort of a taster. We're going to have another book club in a month or so that people can actually read the book and then we can talk again. But this is sort of the first one. So um, I guess we'll just start with our takes. So um, I'll just start off. I was just thinking about Georgia O'Keeffe a lot because I wanted to start painting animal skulls again. And I've always had a bunch of animal skulls just kind of like looming around my studio. And I approached them earlier with kind of a classical approach, sort of like a very tight painting style and a lot of rendering. And I would say like a tenebristic palette. And that was all very nice. But I think I got into thinking about Georgia O'Keeffe because when I was younger, she was one of the artists that we would be shown in like children's classes. And I did a few skull or like I did a pelvis painting of a cow. One of my teachers brought that in, and and then and of course the flowers, the really large flowers were kind of interesting in their abstractness. But I think all of that got me thinking like, hey, I want to read a biography on Georgia, and I think that the book we're reading currently is a recent addition to Audible. I'm not sure if that's true because I found another one before that was written by sort of a house assistant. When she was older, she needed a lot of assistance because she was going blind. But um, that book was sort of like Georgia from Keyhole, whereas this one was a great overview. So um, yeah, why don't you tell me how much you got up to, Sharon?
So, yeah, when I was in high school, I had one of her orchid paintings on my bedroom wall. Um, and I I remember my grandmother and my aunt would take me to different art exhibits, and I saw one of her paintings at the exhibit. I always thought that her work was like a lot of watercolor, but the more I read about her and learned about her, she did a lot of oils too.
Yeah.
So, so let me just say, like, I knew that this book was not going to be, it was a challenge, right? Just merely the size is a challenge. But I read about her before, and it was mainly about her and Stieglitz.
Hmm.
So this went into in-depth backstory of where she grew up, and it explained in a roundabout way how she became the person and the artist that she turned into. Um, so that was very interesting to me. Um, in the beginning, I thought, man, you know, she was out in the middle of nowhere for her growing up. Um, I mean, you think about it today, where I live in such an urban setting, even in the suburbs, and she was out nowhere. Um, but she seemed to really love to travel, which was great.
Yeah.
And she did a lot of traveling, so many places. Like she just up and would go places. Like that to me is kind of like, for me, myself personally, it's kind of scary, but she just did it.
She had those pioneer ancestors, right? Like
Yeah.
she was it descended from Irish and
Yes.
Eastern European? Was it Hungarian?
Yes. I think
And
it was.
yeah, and so she had pioneer ancestors who went out to Sun Prairie. Do you remember what state that was in? Was it
It
Idaho?
was it Wisconsin? Wait a minute. Maybe it, oh, got to go back and look.
But her
Teresa.
parents, her grandparents just bought some land for like not very
Yes.
much money,
Right.
had a bunch of
Right.
kids and started a farm.
Yes.
And that's amazing. And then they at some point her ancestors they sell it off, or her parents sell it off, and they have a lot of money and
Yes.
land because her father had five siblings, as one does, and they had all died. So they'd all done very well in life as farmers, and so he just inherited a bunch of land. But they wanted to escape tuberculosis, so they decided
Yeah.
to go move to Virginia, and that's
So
when she gets her first art classes.
it's just like, I mean, and the house that he built, her father built, was very unusual, I guess, for Sun Prairie.
Yeah.
It wasn't typical. They seem to have a very creative, all of them seem to be very creative in their, I guess you have to be when you're out in the middle of nowhere. You have to be creative
Yeah.
be, because you have to make things work with what you have.
Hmm.
You know, it's you can't just go to the store and buy whatever. So maybe that fostered more creativity. I don't know, but
But
you
I
know,
I love that section of her, and she's in school in I think it's Williamsburg, Virginia,
yes,
which we kind of know what it looked like because it's been
hmm,
preserved, right?
yeah,
And she's with a bunch of sort of pre-debutantes who are going to become Southern Belles, and none of them have an intention of working. And they're all done up with ribbons, and
hmm,
they're trying to attract men, and she's like,
yes,
no hair bow, and I'm going to become an artist, and
yeah,
she becomes this privileged art student that's alone allowed to use the art studio after hours, and soon after that she becomes a art teacher, which is one of the few jobs that you could get as a woman. And I believe her sisters also at some point pursued becoming art teachers.
yeah,
Ida did for a long
yeah,
time, and the other job was being a nurse, which I think Ida was also before being an art teacher. But
yeah.
um, an interesting aside, two of her sisters were artists, Ida and Catherine. Did you
Hmm.
get that far?
I had known that prior, but I I don't remember if I got into that yet.
We'll talk about
So
that next
yeah,
next time then. Yeah.
hmm,
Um, the book was like for me very heavy. As I said, I just finished it. So,
hmm,
anytime you finish a biography, it ends with the person's death. And
yeah,
she lived to almost 100. And so um, things were very different in the world, her career, her financial situation, her family situation, everything. So it was really, really interesting, but also just very emotionally heavy. And so many people had died at that point in the story. Um, but there is an interesting aside uh, that is treated in the book about her sisters pursuing art, but
hmm,
it's also um, the subject of a two different museum talks that I watched that I will add to the suggested watch material. Um, but to sum it up in a nutshell, Georgia, she sort of gets plucked from obscurity by Stieglitz in a way, right? At a very
yeah,
early time in American history when New York was getting its first skyscrapers. And she and Stieglitz live in the Seagram building. Is that right? It's the building that they take residence in.
So, Teresa, wasn't that somebody else's place and they let them stay there?
Uh, I think
Cause
this might have been the second one, but they're paying a lot of money.
yeah,
And it's a building
okay.
for its time. It's very unusual because you don't have to cook. There's no kitchen, and the building
Yes.
cooks for you. And it's she's got these great views. And in one of the talks I added to the suggested watching material shows the painting she made in New York. And there's a very interesting um, sort of the great thing about Georgia, she wrote so many letters. So a lot of this is very well documented, but she writes about um, basically she's plucked up out of obscurity. She no longer has to teach or work for a living. And Stieglitz, through his connections, is selling the heck out of her work for very large sums. And like almost right away. And so she's painting, and one of the things she decides to paint is skyscraper views, and she was
Hmm.
collecting seashells at the time. So seashells and stuff with flowers against a window with a skyscraper view of the city. And apparently in a letter she writes, the men don't want me to paint New York. That's their territory.
Oh,
But she persists, and she sells out all her skyscraper view paintings, and no one else sells in a show. And so after that, they're like, okay, you can paint skyscrapers. But she's an interesting figure because she's brought into a sort of an upper class art world with mostly men, and they're older than her. And so I think at the beginning of the book they discuss this, but she had the interesting fate of outliving her contemporaries, becoming obscure, and then there's a cycle where a generation has to
mm,
pass, like 20 years, 30, and then you become popular again. But most people don't
yeah,
experience this because they're dead. But she
yes.
lived it, yeah, which is fascinating. So she has some interesting like twists in her story. And anyway, the sisters come in because she's sort of made it into that, like she's being written about. She's collected for large amounts of money. Um, and her sisters are sort of painting, which she's encouraged them to do because she invites them to the Stieglitz summer house every summer, and she's a good older sister. I think she's very generous with them over the years, like helping them pay for their college and education and stuff. But at some point, there's a complicated sort of period in her life where we'll just talk about next time. But the gist is she tells them to stop painting because she doesn't want the competition.
Oh,
Yeah. And one of them does, and one of them doesn't. But the one who doesn't, she kind of goes quiet on. They don't talk for a long time.
wow.
And that one lives I think she lives the life Georgia would have lived without Stieglitz and without
Mm,
success. She's always teaching, always moving, and never
right.
quite building anything because of that. So that was
Yeah.
really interesting. Um, yeah, you'll
Yeah.
get to that part later.
So it seems like Stieglitz didn't want her. He didn't like travel. Uh, and and Georgia loved traveling,
Oh
and
yeah.
he wanted like a life of predictability, and he didn't want kids because of what happened with his daughter,
Hmm.
and I think that was kind of sad for her.
Yeah.
Um, you know, you you kind of wonder like what might have been, but maybe she wasn't meant to have kids, but he he wanted predictability. She would go to Maine.
To get away a little, right? To go to the
Yeah.
sea. Yeah.
Hmm. And so I guess he just didn't like Maine. He didn't want to be there.
Well, he was also like he seemed like a social butterfly. Like he was always having guests over, and there's a lot of
Mm,
sort of funny chapters in the book where she'll be at the summer house, um, and she wanted just to themselves for a bit so she can work, and then before she knows it, the entire family's there.
yes,
She's
yes.
being driven nuts, and she needs to like
That would
renovate a
drive me
barn.
crazy. I'm sorry.
Yeah, yeah, I find myself identifying with her a little bit. This
Oh
is
man,
funny. Um,
That would drive me insane,
well,
you
that's
know?
actually why when you were saying at the beginning, like that the book is a big undertaking, I didn't think it would be because I was like, well, we want to just be alone and we listen to books, we paint. Like, isn't that that's like what, it's a week or two, of
Um,
painting. I'm just joking, but I like actually I could have read the book faster, but I was sort of savoring it and drawing it out myself. But um I don't know. It's definitely like it's a contemplative life, but Stieglitz seemed to be like the impresario. He was the apparently she never sold a painting. She always let the sales go through Stieglitz. And
really?
yes, and after that she let the sales go through this Doris Bree dealer.
Hmm.
And then after that the sales went through a sort of like an assistant partner of hers. Von Hamilton, who's like at the very end of the book. So I'm sure we'll talk about that later.
Well, she had many, I guess, wannabe, well, they were suitors, you know. She had many men in and out of her life.
Oh, so what did you think about that? Do you think that she was just too progressive for them, or was it because she was pursuing her art that things never quite came together?
Well, I think at the time, it, you, you always had this feeling like you might have to give up your art to be like cooking and taking care of others. And,
Yeah,
her art was really important to her. And on top of that, her, she had a big family. And I think
yeah,
you get tired of taking care of everybody.
right.
And she might have been at that point
Yeah,
where,
there's a sad scene where her mother dies of
mm,
tuberculosis.
oh, that was horrible.
Yeah, very alone, just with two daughters around, and the husband's off trying to get work somewhere. There seems to be a pattern of men abandoning the family in in the family, but like the husband will be like, I'm just gonna go back to Europe, and he like never comes back. In this
Right.
case, this guy he goes off, but um he's not around when his wife dies. But anyway, um she ends up taking care of the youngest daughter or sister, or if I remember.
Yeah.
So yeah, um, yeah,
Well, and
that could be a good point. Yeah,
I just remember, like growing up, I had a girlfriend that her family had they were very large, and she was always taking care of the younger siblings, and she never had kids. And I just think it just wears you out.
hmm.
Yeah. And,
Frida Kahlo, I think had a
yeah,
similar story.
yeah.
Um,
It, and she was extremely progressive for her time. I mean, I can't, when I'm hearing this stuff, and they're saying, oh, 1918. I'm like, oh my gosh, like at that time.
right. It was the Victorian era, practically, right? Or it was
Yeah.
just after the Edwardian.
So, I can't believe the stuff she did and really got away with.
Oh yeah, yeah. There was a lot of that. What were they calling it's just Georgia, or like they would kind of roll
Yeah.
their eyes at her behavior. But there was that a kind of a strong pioneer independence or stubbornness in the family too. So they sort of, they weren't like, let's put her in an insane asylum. They were
Yeah.
um, accepting as well. But yeah, that's absolutely right. Like, and she was a early feminist in several times in the
Yeah.
book. She gives a
Hmm.
talk or two, and she recommends different books to friends of hers.
Oh, yeah. Well, Stieglitz was
Yeah,
sending her books
right.
about different philosophers, but also philosophers that were proponents of the feminist movement.
Yeah,
And she was reading, I guess, poetry by feminists, and she was getting more involved in that. And
yeah.
then she met that what was her friend's name? Teresa Anita? Was it Anita?
Anita Politzer.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's the one.
And I
She's
got
the
a
one
little
who gets her into the gallery, if I recall.
yes.
Yeah.
And I guess Stieglitz originally liked Anita.
Yeah.
Wasn't that the
Well, it kind of seems like Stieglitz liked every young woman he came across.
That's true.
And then he seems like he made attempts, and most of them sort of, including Ida, the younger sister of Georgia, sort of like laughed it off or, would scold him. But um, as we see later in the book, not everyone put him off, and that led to some problems for their relationship.
Well,
Um,
and I think Georgia originally didn't care for him because there was a falling out with William Merritt Chase, right? There was an argument in the studio, wasn't that?
oh, right. She comes in and there's like excitement
He,
going on.
he slams his hat down because I guess he was showing younger artists in there, and I guess William Merritt Chase thought he should show established.
Oh,
I think
yeah, that was nice to see. If you watch some of those early videos or you have the book, like apparently the Stieglitz gallery was it the Room at that time? The first one was called the Room or something, or no, that was the second
mm,
gallery. There was like three.
that
There
was the
was the
second.
American
Yeah.
Place, there was the Room, and then there was 291. That was the
Yes.
first one was 291.
Yes.
And they kept having them in skyscrapers, which I had to remind myself would have been very fancy back in the day.
Yes.
It doesn't sound like much. It sounds like an apartment somewhere in a high rise, which
Yeah.
today is like not a prestigious address.
No, it's just a box, right?
Although I mean, there are galleries in New York that are in high rises, so I guess it's still prestigious. But at the time, that was a big deal to be in one of those buildings. So anyway, he had this gallery, and most galleries had gilt frames with elaborate, carving and moldings, and like you said, they were looking at William Merritt Chase type artists, and apparently the Stieglitz gallery, the 291 was just like it was started off as a photography gallery, right? And then he carried the paintings
Yes.
in and drawings, and it was just like a chair, or maybe no furniture and just white walls. So that was like the
Right.
first white wall gallery. It
Hmm.
was minimalist. And then Stieglitz also had a very interesting approach to selling art, which was like, if I can try to summarize it, he didn't think just anyone should be able to buy art. So he didn't like people who had a lot of money buying it, but that's eventually all he sold to.
That's right.
And he was like he played hard to get, and then he wanted things to be for the people, but he was really against Georgia having shows at the Museum of Modern Art and stuff later on. So it was a kind of an interesting thing, but um he sort of came from a privileged background. So I guess he was like what you would say independently wealthy. So basically he felt like he was above the commercial. Um and anyway, but I don't know if that's what kind of led to the way he set up his gallery, but that minimalist effect was kind of interesting. So when you see pictures of it and you compare it to other galleries at the time, it's actually quite amazing how minimalist, and you could see why Georgia's work would really fit there, especially the early kind of minimalist watercolors and charcoal she was doing.
So I guess what happened was she was teaching and she sent her friend her charcoals, Anita,
Yeah,
and Anita gave them to Stieglitz.
yeah. And then he
And
puts them on a show without telling her.
yes,
And then
yes.
a student of Georgia's asks her, um, "Are
Because
you Jane O'Keefe or something?" Like they got her name
yes,
wrong, and then that's how she got tipped off.
yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know how I would feel about I don't know, like you're sending your friend your drawings and they take them and give them, I don't know.
I have I've heard that story before because I watched a movie about this. It was a
Hmm.
fictionalized, movie, but so I had a little bit of imagery in my head, but that's one of the reasons I wanted to read this book because watching a movie, I don't know if it's a Hollywood movie or whatever it is, but watching a movie is not the same thing as actually reading the biography. So I'm like, let me actually read the real biography. And it was such a good book. There were so many letters quoted, and it was organized in, I thought, like a very fair way. Tried to be fair to all the different characters. Um, but my read was that Georgia was playing hard to get, which, like, she
But
wanted to be in the gallery. She wanted a career, but women simply just didn't go say, put me in this gallery. So I think
right,
her sending Stieglitz or sending Maria or yeah,
Anita,
Pulitzer, Anita,
Anita,
sending
yeah,
them all these drawings, which would have been originals, right?
yeah,
It's not like sending a bunch
a
of
copy,
prints, yeah,
yeah.
or an email, right? Like we complain now sending an email. That's a lot of work, right? She sent originals over by post. She definitely wanted to be in that gallery. Come on,
Yeah,
I think she was playing a little hard to get there.
yeah,
I think
that
she's
makes
very
sense.
happy that Anita Pulitzer put her work there.
Yeah, yeah,
And together. So that's what I think. And
I
it was
agree.
like 7 or 8 years in the making, right? She knew about Stieglitz since her art school days, and she was at the University of was it Chicago,
Yeah.
the art university. So
Hmm.
um, yeah, I think that she's definitely not offended.
Yeah, well, it says in chapter 12, it says, Mr. Stieglitz, if you remember for a week why you liked my charcoals that Anita Pulitzer showed you and what they said to you, I would like to know if you want to tell me. I don't mind asking. You can do as you please about answering. Of course, I know you will do as you please. I make them just to express myself. Things I feel and want to say, haven't words for. You probably know without my saying it that I ask because I wonder if I got over to anyone what I wanted to say. So maybe that's where it kind of starts with Stieglitz, I guess.
Yeah,
Like they say here, George's first letter to Stieglitz was um, in, ingenuous, beguiling, a request for confirmation of the value of her work.
yeah,
And then, yeah, I
which
guess
is
she,
a great thing, a great way to approach, I think, a gallery. Um, and she's such a good letter writer. Like she wrote so many
oh my
letters to
gosh.
people.
Ooh,
Yeah, she was good at
well,
making connections, like real connections. And she never comes across as seeming to want something,
yeah,
like what they call
yeah,
today like being thirsty or whatever. She doesn't come across that way. She just comes across as very genuine. And I think that struck a chord with him because I think that's what he wanted. He wanted genuineness.
yeah,
Like he wasn't trying to be elitist with his art um curating, though as we see in the book several times he is very elitist about it.
right.
Like he doesn't want it to work for under a certain amount of money, or he doesn't want to let her have exhibitions for the public, or there's a lot of things he's against, but
He doesn't want her to change her style. Like if she changed,
yes.
he wants her to keep the original style he liked.
Oh yeah.
So, as much as they claim to be feminists or liking that, he's kind of, going against what he claims he likes. So,
Hmm.
don't know.
Yeah.
But he seems to be a favorite of his mother.
Oh. um yeah, is he the oldest?
Yes.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I think that
Uh-huh.
was common. I think she was also the
Yeah.
oldest girl. I think it was common that the oldest would be the
Yes.
favorite. They would also usually inherit everything,
Hmm.
and have power over the younger siblings or responsibility. It seemed to be a
Well, his mother
thing,
invited Georgia and him when he left his wife.
right?
Oh my gosh, Teresa.
Oh, That was hard to read.
Should I give it away?
Oh no, no, no. Don't worry about spoilers. I mean, this is all history. So I feel like being afraid to give away spoilers is disrespectful to the dead because this isn't fiction. This is real, right? And this book has been out since the year she died. So which was 1987, I believe. 1986. It came out in 1987, I think. So don't worry about spoilers. If there's anything I was like, we'll talk about later, it was just because I thought we'll wait till you get there. But uh, no,
So
talk about
I
it.
guess you know, he'd had enough. He dropped and he I guess he dropped his daughter off at camp and
Yeah.
then went to the apartment and had like was having sex with Georgia and his wife came in.
Yeah. We,
Oh,
well, he started it as a photography thing, right?
yes,
Which
yes,
which is
that's
one of
correct.
his tricks, I think, if I
Uh-huh.
recall from
Well, yes,
the time
very.
at the Lake George where they went in the
Mm-hmm.
summers. He liked to do photography, which
Mm-hmm.
I actually haven't seen that much of his photography, but
No.
um, I think I've seen a couple of his like
Yeah,
cityscapes. Obviously, I've seen the Georgia O'Keeffe ones.
come up
I,
and see my etchings.
right.
Oh man. That to me, I don't know.
Well, that's a red flag there, right?
Yeah.
And we see that that happened to her later because he starts the affair with Nyman. Is it Dorothy Nyman,
So
the
was
gallery
she
assistant?
so I read that in another book because I'm not to that point yet,
Okay.
but I read that because I the book that I read was just about Stieglitz and Georgia. And that was it. But yeah, and wasn't the that woman coming to the lake as well?
Oh, it basically became a a very um an unfair situation, but it became a situation where Stieglitz basically had a mistress, and Georgia began trying to get away to New Mexico. Like it opened the door for her to like actually leave
Yeah.
at the beginning in small parts,
Hmm.
but they never got the same connection back. So like they were still partners. They had a good marriage. They had a successful business, and they would write letters and they would be there for each other. But um, I think the romance was a little gone. And then this lady becomes his basically his new mistress, and
Oh,
she was good for the gallery. She was married as well, and she was much younger, and she had was having children with her husband. So it was a sort of a menage a trois, I guess you'd say. And um, because of the way things were at the time, Georgia never complained about it because women were not supposed to be. I guess Stieglitz had this view of women as like angels and just the nobility of the feminine. So for her to complain would shatter the illusion. So she never
right,
was able to
right.
complain. So it was this undiscussed thorn in their side for the rest of their lives together.
Oh
Um,
boy.
yeah, and it was very bad. At one point, she has to check into a mental institution for two
Yep.
years, and that's when she was mean to her sisters too. I was going to talk about that, but she hasn't paid for 2 years, and what's happening is Stieglitz is being neglectful to her emotionally, and then he's being mean to her professionally. So he's panning a lot of her new work, and
Well, the thing about it was he was like doting over her for a
yeah,
long time. Like he was worried about her health. He didn't want to have a child because he thought that she was too frail, you know. Um, I
yeah.
think that was just an excuse, but
I think he was a serial philanderer,
yeah,
is what I get
I
from
agree.
which yeah, and who knows, what how many other ladies there were, but I think that the one with if I'm getting it right, Dorothy Nyman is that was very public, and it was definitely not that was the one that bothered Georgia,
Yeah.
and yeah, it's hard to read about. It's
Yeah.
but the only nice thing seems to be that she gets away to New Mexico where she makes some of her bust. I think my favorite ones are the bone paintings, the bone and the flowers.
Yes.
And the
Hmm.
descriptions of the house, the two houses, the Ghost Ranch, and then the Abiquiu, and the type of road trip she takes, and just like how she lays out her gardens. Um, like she
Yeah,
was into organic eating, and she was growing like vegetables and poppies, and going out and collecting bones. And,
that part must have really spoke to you.
yeah, yeah, that's why I was like, that's what I'm here for. I like
Yeah.
all the tea is interesting, the whatever the gossip and stuff, but
Hmm.
I
Right,
was
right.
visually I was most interested in the uh the animal skull paintings and the landscapes.
Yep.
Um and the way she takes realism, but then she sort of is it not quite surrealism, is it? But it's like she does a giant flower, she does a floating skull, um, and she does these
Yep.
sort of like limited color palettes. There's an interesting thread in the book about how she likes white as a color. So she'll set her bones down on white or a white cloth, or um she sees herself as white, or like there's this like she has not a synesthesia, but she seems to have like an association with colors. Um,
Yes, because it
that's really
said like
interesting.
she, even like when she was very young, she like she could remember colors and images um vividly. And if things did not please her, like where she was living, I think it was in Texas when she was teaching, she couldn't stand the room that she was renting. And
Oh yeah, she paints it
she,
black, right?
yes, she wanted to paint it, and they said absolutely not. And I think she ended up living somewhere else.
Yeah.
And then she got a bad rap, like a bad reputation because they were all talking about her wanting to paint it black.
Well, she had a bad reputation just for
Oh yeah.
living by herself and going on
Yeah.
walks with men, or
Yes, out and you know that
yeah.
white thing, maybe it was because she lived on the prairie like that growing up.
Oh, yeah.
You
Well,
know, maybe.
I'm trying to think of that time period, and it wasn't too long ago that like you had the dark brown shadow kind of earth color palette aesthetic.
Yeah.
Like Victorian England, right, with Ruskin,
Yeah.
and Ruskin is like a good painting should be brown like a fiddle, like this kind of dark thing. And so she's sort of I think by setting things on white canvases, and then it
Hmm.
fit that white wall gallery later perfectly. It's like
Yeah.
that's what I was trying to say about like the skyscraper, like living in the skyscraper. Um, Later we'll talk about her like jetting around the world in first class on vacations. It's like these were all new things. Like these had not been done before
Yeah.
that much. So um that was kind of neat, I think, to see uh, all those
Yeah.
different aspects. And the book, it's they don't talk too much about the art. Like it, it's good for artists to read, but it's not one of those books where they're talking about techniques or colors, or
No.
there's not a lot of talk about it. So you have to imagine it, which is fine by me. And yeah, but
Well, I
I really
actually went and bought like more books of her artwork to like somewhat inform me more of her art.
she was
Um,
prolific, wasn't she?
yeah,
Yeah, yeah. And
she just loved it. And I
yeah.
think maybe that's why it didn't work out with Arthur. She really seemed to love Arthur.
Arthur
Um,
McMahon.
mm,
Yeah.
but he wasn't so much like into like she couldn't discuss art with him, I guess.
He's the
Uh,
engineer, right?
yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, while I'm reading this and listening to it, I'm like woulda, coulda, wonder what it would have been like
Oh, if
if
she'd
she,
met someone
like
not as imposing as controlling as Stieglitz, maybe like
that's right.
a younger
And
man.
someone that maybe appreciated her,
Hmm.
you
I
know.
Well, so here again, this is my take, but I of course was raised with like, Stieglitz bad. Stieglitz objectified her, which he definitely did with the photography that she would have an exhibit, and then he would put nude photographs of her
Yeah.
right behind her art. And then
Yeah.
people would make reviews, and apparently it really rankled her that um, people saw just sex in all her paintings. To this day, well, like when I tell people I'm going to
Yes.
paint Georgia O'Keeffe, uh, they'll go, "Oh, I don't like her," because they think it's like
Really?
pornography. Yeah, like women will say that, and I'll be like, I won't say anything because it's like not the place, but I mean, um, it's just kind of interesting, like that sticks, like the first lie sticks, you know. Um,
Right.
Whereas I think very few of her paintings are anything like overtly sexual. And I read an interesting uh opinion on the flower ones. It's, well, all flowers are sexual, right? Because
Yes.
they're the male and the female in one flower, and you're painting the
That's
flower
right.
part. So
That's right.
it's sort of it's not something you can avoid painting really when it comes to flowers. But um well, anyway, so back to my take on Stieglitz. So yeah, he's sort of a philanderer. He's controlling a bit or stifling. But I also think though that if it hadn't been for him, she might have led more of a life like her other sister Ida, where she's just constantly being a teacher. And uh, in those days, it's like she's teaching, what would you call it, high schoolers,
Mm.
elementary schoolers. Like she's not teaching at a college level. She probably wouldn't have been allowed to do that. So, um, and I don't think that the teaching would have given her a lot of time to make her own art. And
Yeah.
you see how hard it is for her sisters to get
Yeah.
a career going. So though part of it they say was because Stieglitz and Georgia actively tried to uh, destroy their careers. Um,
Mm.
but at the same time, if it hadn't been for Stieglitz and the Georgia making the O'Keeffe name big in New York, which seems like it's a small cliquish community that's allowed to
Yeah.
exhibit. So I don't know if she
Yes.
ever would have had a chance at being famous. And um, towards the end of the book, it's amazing like how wealthy she was. Like even when she died, she had like $100 million worth of property, like in the 80s, which is a lot. And um, it's like, yeah, like you can do things like that when you're an artist and you're independently wealthy. You can um, make whatever you want, live wherever you want, travel wherever you want. You're not trying to paint for the algorithm or um, do a commission,
You're right. Right.
not that those things
Hmm.
are bad,
Hmm.
but like I think that it allows you to um just be a pure artist, kind of the way Stieglitz wanted art to be. Um and I think if it hadn't been for Stieglitz, it's a good chance she wouldn't have got very, very far. Um that's what I
True. Yeah.
that doesn't sound very feminist, but I mean, think about how many other artists were trying to make it back then too, right? Like people are always shocked when I'll say things like the model for Manet's paintings.
Hmm.
She was an artist,
Yes.
right? She was an artist and
Right.
she was
Hmm.
modeling to make money. No one
Yeah.
knows that. No one knows that.
Right.
So many 19th century women were modeling to make money so they could be painters. It never went anywhere. Um, and most of the ones where it went somewhere, it was like Mary Cassatt or Berthe Morisot because they were already very wealthy.
Hmm.
So there's like an imbalance in art history where um, you either have to have married a rich man or come from money to be an artist, which is sort of like skews people's impressions of art history for women, I think. But anyway, so I feel like Stieglitz was sort of a necessary thing for that
Yeah.
time period. That sort of backward, what do you want to call it, time period.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't,
Even his not wanting kids kind of allowed her to paint in a way.
I think she had romantic ideas about having kids,
Yeah.
but I'm not sure that that would have been a good thing for her. So, but she seemed to like, I guess that's where like she wrote a letter to Arthur that
Mm,
she saw a little boy at one of her, I don't know if it was like a school she was at or, and how it just hit her.
mm,
And I guess it hit her in a way that she was surprised that
Oh
she
yeah.
even thought that it um, that she would feel that way about any child. But maybe she wasn't meant to have any kids.
Yeah.
You
Well,
know,
Steve Litz certainly didn't want that to happen.
no, no,
Yeah.
that wasn't happening.
Yeah.
But
Um, yeah, apparently he was like monitoring her menstrual cycle.
yeah,
That's pretty
well, that's what
creepy.
I'm saying. Like all that, and then he goes with some other woman. Like I just don't like that. The whole thing, I just can't get my head around. But you know,
Yeah. I don't want to say this like
he's a
I
bit of
think
a narcissist.
he's a necessary evil.
Yeah,
Um,
he's
but then
the
when you see some of the other characters that pop up, it's like he wasn't that bad. So I was telling another uh a friend about the book because I was like towards the end part and I said, you know, you're like reading the book and you're like, gosh, I can't wait for like Stieglitz to go away so that he can just have this idealistic life in the desert. Um, and it kind of she has it when he's older and she's not spending as much time with him.
yeah,
Um, but and then a little bit after, but you know, when he dies, it's like she is social, but I think that she loses almost complete contact with her New York contacts and the gallery
hmm
world
hmm
and then she sort of creates her own little kingdom uh out in Abbey Q and I guess Santa Fe in that area, but um it's like you know in a way you miss him like he was performing a lot of very necessary tasks for her
yeah,
promotion wise like facilitating her when she was younger to be able to just like quit teaching and to paint
yeah,
and introductions and in a way he was doing it in a selfless way I would say um so that's my like my I don't know what you call it, like my devil's advocate for Stieglitz
hmm
um because you'll see later there's people who try to take advantage of her money and abuse their power with her and it's not nice
right,
um and I don't know so I think it I don't know if it could have happened without him in a way or someone like
yeah,
him and he
hmm
was unusual I think he was an unusual man for the time and like his dedication to art and all that stuff um but yeah
Well, and I guess is it his name Paul Strand?
yeah is that the photographer or
He was another
yeah
artist,
another artist
and
I didn't look up his work.
they were no, neither did I, but they were I guess they were worried about Georgia because she was sick, she got sick.
Yeah,
And
she's always
then
getting sick, right?
yes, and then I guess she was teaching and staying in some farmhouse, and some man from down the road, another farmer or
Farmer,
something,
yeah.
came and was looking in their windows and I guess banging on the windows, and she told Stieglitz and Paul Strand about it, and they came there. I guess
Strand
Yeah,
comes to the
he
rescue,
come.
like all
Yes,
chivalry, and he comes with a gun, and he. I want to
yes,
add that I think it was either Georgia or her friend. It was like two of them
y
recovering from a
yes,
illness. One of them had a loaded pistol, and
yes,
when the would be rapist or whatever tries to get in through the window, he takes a look at the pistol and he leaves. So
yeah,
they were good at defending themselves, but yeah,
yeah,
they get pretty spooked and they go to the police and this guy's just denying it.
yes,
So then Western justice comes in the form of right Paul Strand and he
yeah.
hauls the guy out and you
But I
know
think Paul got in big trouble.
I thought that he once he told the story to the police officers or the sheriffs, they kind of
Yeah,
believed him and he was fine.
yeah.
But he got in trouble for kidnapping
Oh, that's right.
with a loaded gun
Kidnapping.
because yeah.
Well, it really wasn't a gun, though.
Oh
He was
right,
just
was it fake gun?
pretending.
Yeah, that was brave of him. Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah, that was a
that
pretty
was
cool
brave of
story.
him.
Yeah, I
I
like
think I
that.
was running during that time. I think I had to stop.
Yeah, I was too. I had to listen to that like 3 times. I was like, what just happened here? Yeah. And that's that sort of at least what the author says led to the not the marriage proposal, but the moving Georgia over to
Yes.
New York. And they get
Uh-huh.
married like a few years later, like 5 years later, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
But then, she doesn't want to see Paul Strand anymore, and Stieglitz invites him to Lake George. I don't know if I could have seen him after that. I don't know.
Seeing
But
Paul.
Paul, yeah.
Why?
Because like he had a thing for her, and then she
Oh,
goes
oh
and gets
yes.
married,
Right, right, right.
and
Right.
I
Yeah.
don't know, that's kind of weirdish,
Well, I
but
think he
that's
has
just me.
I think he brings a wife over and
Oh,
then
okay.
and then
Okay.
they have a section about how they kind of made a new friendship up after that.
Yes.
Like it was weird, but they figured it out, I think.
Yes, I read
Yeah.
that, but like me myself, I
Oh,
would not have that would have made me feel weird. But
interesting.
I don't know.
Yeah.
Oh,
Well,
it's
I mean,
just
these were probably, these were you know,
diff
recently Victorian times. So
different
I'm
times.
sure that
Yeah.
him having a thing or her having a thing for him would have probably been you know, whatever, talking politely or
Yeah.
a
Yeah.
significant look, not nothing
Yeah. Yeah,
nothing like what she and Stieglitz had later, you know.
I definitely had to keep telling myself this was not today. This is
This is not
another
hookup culture,
no, this is another time.
right?
And I just had to keep saying that to myself. And I had to like keep like looking back because you know what? She did do a lot of progressive things though,
Yes.
for the time. So many things that I don't think other women would have gotten away with,
Oh
just
yeah.
being that her family was so unique.
Well, there's a section in the book where her whole family, right, they've sort of made a lot of money off selling their properties
Yeah.
out west. And so they moved to Virginia thinking they're going to escape tuberculosis, which they don't.
Yeah.
But they're basically in the upper class for a while. So they've sent Georgia, their oldest daughter, to a very nice like finishing school for girls, which you don't go there unless you're like expecting never to work again, right? Like you're
Yeah.
so for a while they have this upper class life, but unfortunately their finances and their standing in society takes a downturn because the community is, I guess you could call it somewhat racist to them.
Yeah.
Um,
Because they're
because
not
back
from that
then
area.
yeah, they're all white people, right? There was real racism where there was African Americans and they were not supposed to work with them. And Georgia's father would just go talk to the African
Hmm.
Americans and be like, "You need a hand?" And he'd chop wood with them. And the community was like, "You can't mix with blacks. What are you doing?" And
Hmm.
so they
Hmm.
were seen as gauche. And probably because of their being, I don't know what, Eastern European or whatever, they weren't the right sort. And so nobody would do business with their father to
Yeah.
the point where he had to start a shell company that was owned by a friend of his. Um,
Yeah.
and that didn't work either. So they just he invested all his money into 2 different businesses and the community boycotted him.
Yeah.
So that's why he had to move away, I think, eventually to try to make money because that area was so intolerant to him being whatever a Hungarian or just someone from the Midwest. It was like
Yeah.
they were uncultured, I guess. There was
Hmm.
just something
Hmm.
off. I thought that was a really interesting
Well, when
thing.
they said they were going to move, and then it said, but that it did, the author said it didn't, their idea of what they thought it was going to be like didn't
Right?
pan out,
Because
you
there's no
know?
Yelp or Google
Yeah.
Maps or
No.
right. You
No.
just like you got one move. It's going to cost a lot of money and it's going to be very dangerous.
Yeah.
And you're just going on some hearsay. And apparently, just like now, there were a lot of people who loved to sell you places that weren't quite what they seemed, um, and they fell for it. So
Yeah.
they ended up going to the South and
That was a big
it,
risk.
yeah, because they could have just lived out their lives happily in the Midwest.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Well, I guess they thought they were going to escape the tuberculosis.
right.
And it was a risk they were willing to take
Yeah.
because I guess both of his brothers died of
All of
tuberculosis.
them. He had like five
Yeah.
siblings. That's why they had so much money because they had all been industrious, hardworking people. And
Mm,
they had bought land and then they all died. So he just inherited a ton of estates and land. And they were like, we don't have to be farmers anymore.
right.
We don't have to work anymore. Let's go somewhere safe and send the children to a nice school and
Mm,
I don't know what, be gentlefolk or something. Like remember they were all like, let's buy some nice
yeah.
furniture and
New
leave everything here.
dishes.
Yeah, we're gonna like start a new life and
Didn't work. So
yeah,
sad for them.
yeah.
Really did not turn out well.
Well, what are well yeah, and it just shows how kind of, like that medieval illustration, The Wheel of Fortune, or the Karl Orff opera Carmina
Mm,
Burana, right? It's like
mm.
up and down and up and down the fortunes go,
Oh, right, 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 right.
and it's amazing how well Georgia did. You
Yes.
just feel scared for her, don't you, when she's younger? Like it just feels so precarious. Um,
Well, how about, and then her mom is on her deathbed
and
and
the rent is due.
the rent's due and they're dragging her down the steps.
Yeah, that's how she dies. She dies
She
walking
dies
down
on
the
the
steps,
steps.
coughing out blood.
I'm like,
That's
there was no
precarious.
way. Like, landlady killed her.
Yeah, well, they were like, I guess in that kind of area or time period, the landlady had been waiting a few months for her money, and
Yes,
maybe the landlady could have been in trouble if she hadn't got it. So it's like she felt like she could demand to see the mother. Like, what good is that going to do? She's on her deathbed with teenage girls looking after her,
that's right.
but that's what happens, and yeah, it's so precarious.
Oh,
So that's what I meant
gosh.
about like Stieglitz. Like maybe he's the necessary evil because it's like the that's
Yeah,
what you're dealing with back then.
yeah.
That's pretty harsh. And then
Yeah.
she's sort of whisked away into a life of cooks and multiple homes and like
Hmm.
very, very well-connected people living in skyscrapers and um, people who buy art. Like it's like a fairy tale almost. Um,
Well, and it's very enticing after being through all that. I mean,
yeah.
oh wow. I mean,
It's
I'm
interesting actually. She talks about this in her her letters to her sisters when she's encouraging them to be artists, and she's um, saying like you don't want to be commercial. She's kind of parroting Stieglitz, like commercialism ruins your art and blah blah blah. Because she tried to be a illustrator for products. She did like the
yeah.
little Dutch girl soap, I
Yes,
think, or
yes.
whatever.
Hmm.
So she didn't like that. That she just wanted to be a fine artist, and then apparently there's a lot of like as we see with the way she treated her sisters later, there's a lot of competition in the fine art world. It's not all fun.
Well,
There's
it's
reviews
funny.
and there's courting press and anyway, what were you gonna say?
It's funny, they didn't want to be commercial, but wow, her stuff is everywhere, right?
Yeah.
It's every art museum you go into, you can buy something Georgia O'Keeffe.
So there's at the end of the book, there's an interesting chapter about her death, and she died with uh I guess at the time what would have been like $50 million worth of paintings. I'm not sure how many paintings that is, but like a lot of paintings still in her possession. Um, and so it's hundreds of paintings, I believe. And they ended up being divided to many different institutions and museums and organizations that could exhibit them. So that was intentional on her part. Or at least it had been. She had several wills. And um, I have to be careful what I say because there still might be living people here in this situation. But she had I guess you would say she had a partner later in life who was
Mm.
significantly younger than her.
Oh,
Um,
yes.
he
Hmm.
starts off as a sort of a groundskeeper, and then he ends up, um, in the book at least, tricking her into thinking that they're married. And she's
Really?
very
I
old
didn't get
and
that
she's
far.
blind and um there's a lot of different it's like a 13-year relationship. There's a lot of different people saying things, but a lot of the housekeepers were saying that it became a very abusive, controlling
So,
relationship, and he ended up taking there were these things called codicils, and he ended up getting her to rewrite her two wills, and
yes.
everything
Mm,
that was supposed to go to her family went to him, all the money, all the art, and then eventually it got overturned because their sisters challenged it and they didn't want the money. They're like, we want the works to go to charity and we want the works to go, the money to charity and the works to museums.
mm,
And that did succeed. Um, but at the time when she was changing the wills, um, supposedly she was in her right mind. So she willingly changed her wills to deprive the museums and her family of um, I guess the estate. But then there's like debate against like, okay, well, was she being tricked or manipulated in the background emotionally? And there was a lot of yelling apparently going on, and she would sort of cave in, but um, it's a very sad part towards the end of the book. You'll see, but anyway, that's why there's so much art in museums because she wrote a will that willed so much of the art to museums. She lived a long time. She was very prolific, and I think because her work sold for so much money, she didn't have to sell all her work. So she would be both she and Stieglitz were very careful about like not selling everything really fast. It was like selling things to the right people at the right time, holding a lot back for later. And so it was almost like they were planning her um, fame from the start.
wow. Yeah.
Yeah.
So,
Because
so
you
the,
see a lot of artists like, they'll be like flash sale, everything
yeah.
50% off. Studios,
Yeah.
like there's no studio sales. There was no like free painting if you sign up for a newsletter. Like, no. So they were definitely planning on making her like a famous name from day one.
Oh, oh my God. So that was the guy, Juan Hamilton,
Yes. And he
right?
had he had a wife, which she was very upset that he got married, and then he had kids. Um, and I think he's still alive, or that I'm sure some of those kids are alive. So I don't want to read into anything. I'm
Yeah.
just saying what I read in the book. But apparently, it was all solved amicably, and um, yeah. But anyway, huge estate. That's what happens, right?
Yeah.
Everyone's like, hey, I want
Everybody wants a
a
piece.
bit. Yeah, and,
Yes.
and and one of the things was like, well, why are the if the sisters want stuff, why are they not visiting her? And there was some of the housekeepers were saying, well, she wasn't allowed to receive visitors because he had complete power of attorney and wouldn't let her see them. But then there was also the her not wanting to talk to him for various reasons of I don't know what
Right, right, right.
competition about the art, just whatever. It's interesting. I'd never heard any of those things.
No,
The ending really took me by surprise, that last bit. Um, and I can only imagine it would be because there are still living relatives, so you don't want
true,
to
true.
ever say anything like that's what I was saying before. It's like this isn't fiction. This is real. This
That's
is really
right.
someone's
Well,
life, right?
see, yes. And it parts of it was almost as if it were fiction
Yeah.
because there was so much stuff going on, so many like stuff you see in like, you know, the old soap operas kind of thing,
Oh yeah.
or
Yeah. I had heard about Juan Hamilton in like a small little article, and I was like, oh, that's interesting. Um, but this book, which had already been published like way before that article, was not as glowing a story.
hmm,
Um, but the author does a very good job of sort of telling both sides of the story, to be honest. So, um, and
well,
she did have like a controlling side to her. Like there are a lot of cases in the book of her getting people to do things for her and not paying them fairly, or she had a
well,
habit of gifting paintings and then wanting them back later. Like it's like uh Anyway, what were we gonna say?
Well, I guess when they were growing up, they would like she got things the other kids didn't get.
Yeah,
She had her own bedroom. The other kids didn't have their own bedroom.
yeah,
Sometimes they would call her the queen, like
yeah,
queen.
yeah. In
Um,
Georgia.
s- yeah. So there was that side to her,
I
you
don't think
know.
she could have got where she did without that personality,
Hmm.
honestly, reading all the things that were in the way, to
Yeah.
her becoming a independent artist. I think that that personality was kind of necessary.
Hmm.
Um,
Yeah.
yeah, so it makes sense.
And I
Yeah.
just sometimes I feel like sometimes the oldest, especially the oldest in a big family, it can be that way, because sometimes born um they're born before the other kids and they have more things than the other kids ever have, you
Mm,
know. But
yeah.
who knows? I don't know that part. But the author really gave a lot of detail, you know?
Yes. Yeah. And so much of it was from written accounts.
Yeah.
And I think she did a fairly good job of trying to be neutral and objective. And one of the things you get from reading George O'Keeffe's points of view about things, like there's actually a sad part where Anita Politzer spends 20 years writing a biography on Georgia. And they're older women at this point, and they've been friends forever. And Georgia reads the draft and says, "I'm sorry, you can't publish this." And it just devastates Anita because she spent all this time working on it. And for Georgia to just say, "No,
Yeah.
never publish it," but one of the reasons Georgia gave for not publishing it was that it just painted her in too nice of a light. So I
Oh.
feel like Georgia
Hmm.
wouldn't have wanted, she wanted to be seen like sort of warts and all in a sense, um, like you see that in her paintings. It's like reality is reality. It's not this pretty um fake thing, I guess.
Yeah.
So I guess she kind of saw the duality in things, maybe, if
Yeah.
that makes sense.
Hmm.
That was interesting, but yeah, you leave and you're like, oh, I actually read some negative things about her too, which is like, you don't usually read things like that in glowing reviews or
Right,
biographies.
right.
It was a very balanced biography, I would say. It felt balanced. Um,
I'm just really like I'm taken back, like super detailed. Like even, they called when they would go hiking, they called it tramping,
yeah, I love those
right?
stories.
They'd
Yeah,
go tramping.
that was
I
probably my
never heard.
most. I was mostly impressed with that. This I think of hiking is kind of dangerous, and this is before cell phones and stuff. So
Right.
I was kind of impressed with all the stories of like shooting game and the camping and the tramping around without getting lost. It
Well,
was
and
good.
like her and I guess it was her and her sister, and they didn't have any money. She withdrew $200 out of her bank account. That was all she had, and
Yeah.
I guess the train wasn't going directly they just go off and just go around. They end up like staying at a hunting cabin or something. And I'm like, wow, this is
Yeah.
bold. You
And
know
that's how
that?
she ended up finding her properties in Al near Albuquerque. She would go tramping around or driving around and um she would fall in love with a certain landscape and then she'd end up buying a property at that landscape. So
Like
um
I can just hear my mom
yeah.
saying, "You're doing what?"
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah. Oh, it's dangerous. Yeah. They managed
when
it.
when she's talking about, where they stayed and, the people they met there, they had a great time. And I'm like, wait a minute. You never knew, like I don't know. It was beyond me. It was beyond my thought, I guess, but for the time. But I guess, they didn't, like today you hear the news, about all the horrible things that can happen, but they didn't have that.
Yeah.
So off she went.
Hmm. Yeah.
You know.
Also, I mean, this is just a take on it, but you see how sick people get just by the by, right? Like there's a scene where her hair is falling out and she has to
Yeah.
take almost a year off art school because she
Yes.
contracted some fever. And it's like nowadays you just take some medicine and you're good in a day or two.
Yeah.
Um, and at very worst, you go to the doctor and they give you antibiotics or steroids or something to help you
Yeah.
fight it faster so you don't get that sick and lose that much weight. But at least if you're like young and stuff, you know. But it's so I think they lived in a dangerous world where you could just get sick just living. So it's like what's worse about going and tramping around, and maybe that was actually good for your lungs to get the fresh air. I don't know. Um
Yeah.
I definitely think like maybe they were suffering a bit from like a lack of like AC, heating, and I've stayed in like old buildings. One
Oh,
time I stayed
yes.
in a
Yes.
we have a this thing called the C&O Canal here that runs through the Potomac, like
Mhm.
Washington D.C. area, and there used to be mules that will pull
Yes.
barges,
Yeah.
and there's a tow path, and there are these little
Yes.
houses you can rent to stay in overnight, and they're basically the way they were back in the 1900s.
Hmm.
There's even a old village called Matildaville in the Potomac that's a ghost town. It's just like the rubble of buildings, and so people lived there. And I went in summer, and it was just terrible. Like no heat. It's just like a brick house. It's so clammy, and it gets either too hot or too cold, but you're always like humid and clammy. And I'm like, I don't know how people lived here. Like I was done after one night and it was thundering and raining, so I
Oh
was
my
cold
gosh.
and I just couldn't dry off and it was uncomfortable. And then to make things worse, there's like rich people's houses just like 50 feet away with like state-of-the-art Wi-Fi and television and air
Yeah.
conditioning. I'm like, I wish
Yeah.
I was there.
That's right.
Why am I in this
I'm
supposedly romantic
jealous.
looking house? Yeah, it
Yes.
looks really romantic from like a distance, you know, when you're just walking by, but you try it and you're like, and there's no Wi-Fi. Like the cell service just cut out at that part of in the woods. It's pitch dark, and
Oh.
and you're like, yeah, they probably were just getting sick from like living in, you know, that kind of world.
Hmm.
So going out in the woods was probably a good thing. I don't know.
Yeah.
I'm gonna like say,
Um,
Karen, do you want to join us or have anything to say? I think there you are, Karen.
Hi. Yeah.
Hi.
Hi. Just a disclaimer, I have not listened to the autobiography, but you both have inspired me to do so. Um, yeah, I'm just, mostly I reflect on her work in New Mexico and her time there. And I too, I romanticize that time so much and, don't have an accurate point of view from the history and how brave it was of her to go out to that wild terrain back in 1949 and go out into the desert, often alone. I just want to share something I found, a typical day for her.
Oh
Uh,
yeah.
Let me find this. Well, anyway, I can't find it. She'd wake up with the sun
Hmm.
and then she would have a cup of tea in bed. And then she'd go out for a brisk walk and then come back to her studio, break for lunch, and then go back to the studio. Then she'd have an early dinner around 4:30. But it was all based around the studio and nature, which
Mm.
I resonate with. I'm at a point in my life where and Teresa, I know you have this protocol as well, where you kind of go through this rhythm of painting in the cold months in the winter, and then when the earth changes and the flora and fauna, you really try to connect directly with it,
Yeah, I
which
try to spend outdoors in the daylight and then
mhm.
stay up later painting.
and her understanding and sensuality of that and the direct experience really comes through in her work. You can tell she has a direct connection with what she's painting and
Yeah.
rather than just painting it. So I, like many people, I grew up in the 80s. And her artwork was just so commercialized at that time. And I mean, you could get a poster in any like Cost Plus or whatever. And she was the first artist that I fell in love with. And then it was kind of uncool to like her.
Mm.
And so I just didn't really think about her for many years. And then I went to New Mexico for a sculpture workshop back in 2021. And this artist lived in Abiquiu. So we stayed there, and Deborah Fritz is her name. Her husband was actually a docent at the Georgia O'Keeffe Museum,
Wow.
and we took a tour of her home, which was really cool. Um, and we also spent time at Ghost Ranch, where she would, I mean, I think it's, I don't know, 15 miles from her house, but she would go on camping trips and spend time there by herself for days.
Oh,
And it is rugged. Oh, and the other thing that was noted is that in the mornings when she'd walk, she'd bring a stick so she could
oh,
off rattlesnakes.
yeah, that's tough.
I mean, that is so tough. She was so tough. And, one of the things that surprised me, I think I saw that Hollywood version that you're talking about of the biography of her. Um, but, I think of her in her older years of being this just austere, the way she dressed. It was almost like a nun, the black and
Mm,
white, very austere. And reflecting, I thought the contrast between these like just really sensual, erotic close-ups of flowers, it was just odd to me.
yeah, that's a good
And then
point.
and then seeing the photo that Stieglitz took of her, the younger years, where she's, this nude photo where she's just super sexy, and
Mm.
sensuous, and you can get an idea of her in the bedroom, as this sensuous woman. So, I also came across a photo of her and Frida Kahlo together. Have either of you seen that photo?
I think I
Uh,
have. Um, yeah, I think didn't they correspond back and forth at some point?
Yeah,
I'm
they
not
had
sure.
a deep admiration, even though they didn't spend a lot of time together. When they did, it was really sweet and lovely. And I think Frida Kahlo was a little self-conscious of her writing skills,
Yeah,
especially in comparison to Georgia. Um,
yeah,
but she really admired Georgia, and they both had compassion for each other, both being married to these famous artists, and a lot of turmoil, both of their relationships with these men.
yeah, definitely.
I don't know if you can see.
oh, that's great.
Isn't that the sweetest? And
Oh my gosh,
okay,
wow.
It doesn't look like
So
Georgia.
I know. I'm
doesn't.
wondering if it's her.
Is it AI? No,
Ah,
no, no. There's been a lot of AI images that it makes these.
Is it?
It
Okay,
like it's close, but it's not quite it.
this is from Dartmouth.
Okay, it probably isn't AI then.
Yeah. So this is by Natalie Palmer, and she has some photos of their correspondence to each other
I
too.
believe you.
And just Frida Kahlo just being genuinely concerned about Georgia's health and really wanting to know and how she's doing, and just a sweet friendship. Um,
Yeah.
so, it is so sad to hear about the end of her life when she was so vulnerable and possibly being taken advantage of. And um, I recently experienced my dad's passing, and how what a gift to just be surrounded in love, and to
Mm.
think of her being in the financial complications that she was in, but how cool that she had the foresight to donate so many of her works to the museums. That's very, very cool to know. But
Yeah.
have either of you been to Abiquiu?
I
I have
have.
not.
I was pretty young when I went, so it's probably deep in my subconscious.
Yeah.
Um, I can't quite remember it very well.
Um, well, being there for about 10 days, I mean, she was one of the first, at least that I know of, to go there, and being Teresa, as you said, having that pioneer blood, like, I mean, it's still kind of rough there. There's an energy
Oh.
there that's just kind of has its shadow side to it, which can be inspiring and nourishing for the arts too. In addition to just the beauty, the sky there. I've never seen anything like it. It is so animated with the clouds, the way the clouds move, and just the terrain, the mountains, and then later hearing the native history there. I mean, it is so enchanting there. Everything feels alive, even the rock formations. So, I can see why she moved there. She was there for, gosh, 37 years, almost, I mean,
Mm,
a third to a half of her life. And
yeah.
um yeah, my energy is changing as a 53-year-old artist. I sculpt in clay and it's pretty physically demanding and just kind of taking a break from it right now. I just had an artist residency and I just was like a factory there and just made
Yeah.
18 hours a day most of the day.
Awesome.
Barely slept. It was incredible. But right now I'm just wanting to connect with nature. And I think it's just the natural rhythm of it being so beautiful out. Um, but one morning I was so tired and she was like my power animal. I thought of her. I looked at
Hmm.
this picture of her out in the desert, just this old lady just walking out in the desert. So I'm even more interested in her as a person and the way she lived her life as, and her career. I think it's fascinating, but just the way she connected to nature. I find that at this point what I'm interested in.
Yeah, I think you're gonna like the book. It definitely is like after Stieglitz died, she could just live full time out in Abiquiu and the Ghost Ranch locations. So one was the summer house and one was I guess the winter house.
Yes.
And they were only like 20 miles apart, but it was a big difference because there wasn't very many amenities at the Ghost Ranch, so you couldn't be there all the time. But apparently she took like a world of vacation, like she would do once a year with friends. So she did like Costa Rica was their last destination before she couldn't travel anymore, and she went to Japan and all these places. And
Wow.
but I think she just kind of like left the art scene, um, and just was an artist, which is sort of I think the ideal for most artists. Like they just kind of want to be in some inspiring place and make art every day, and like that's
Yeah.
what you do. So yeah, it's definitely inspiring um image. And yeah, I would definitely like to go visit those places again.
Definitely.
There's a story about her never letting people into her studios. So she had
I
privacy around that. She didn't want people to see her painting or photograph it. So the studio would be like a separate room to the rest of the house.
hmm
And she did have a photographer who, I'm forgetting his name, but he did a lot of the photography that of her when she's older, and she gets profiled in interviews and documentaries. And she trusted him a lot, so she got a lot of good colored reproductions of her work done, which is also unusual for that time, and they were like very faithfully made. So, but it's so interesting that like there's no images of her working. Like that was a sacred kind of private thing for her.
I've heard that about other artists though. They don't
Yeah,
they don't want anybody in their studio
yeah.
to see their studio. Maybe just because it's messy. You
Yes.
know?
Yeah. Yeah, I know
I mean, that's just me.
Sharon and I wanted to do this for a while, and we kept saying, let's clean our studios before we do a live stream. And then I had a studio visit with some gallery folks, and then I was like scrambling to clean my studio, and then I was like, okay, I think I'm ready to start the live stream.
Apparently, she kept a very clean studio.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Uh, the other cool thing about visiting her home is they preserved all, well, not all, but many of her shells and bones that she collected out on her walks. so you could
Oh,
see them. It was really powerful. Yeah.
she was a rock collector apparently, and there's a really fun anecdote where she's on a river raft tour with a bunch of friends, and there's like a tour conductor, and she's picking up nice looking rocks, which she liked to do and collect. And everyone starts copying her.
Oh my
And then
gosh.
the tour guide has to say, like, okay, you guys have to put the rocks back because
Ah,
like the boat's gonna sink, you know?
yes, right.
And she kind of looks around and she's like, well, I did it first. Like her look just says that. And so
Yes,
everyone put her
yes.
rocks back and she kept them.
I can keep mine. You,
That's pretty funny.
you guys can't.
Yeah.
I was here first. I love it.
So I'm interested too in the trauma that she experienced. I mean, a lot of it was from childhood and the fear of tuberculosis and her mother dying. I mean, how traumatic, and then even move.
Yeah.
But she, Teresa, I didn't catch. Were you saying that she was institutionalized for 2 years, or was it Stieglitz's daughter?
Oh, yes, they both were actually. That's interesting. Yeah, Stieglitz's daughter, I think she became not quite comatose, but she became very disturbed at his infidelity. And um she would like refuse to see Stieglitz, and yeah, she
Yes.
was in institution. They kind of stopped talking about her after a while, and then she dies of something, but she has a short, unhappy life. Um and kind
So
of refuses
sad.
to, yeah, to accept um Georgia, and then doesn't like what happened with the situation. Apparently, Stieglitz and Kitty, that was the daughter's, no, the daughter's
Yes.
Kitty, right?
Yes,
Stieglitz
daughter's
and
Kitty.
his wife, whose name I'm forgetting, she was like an
Was it
heiress to a,
Elizabeth?
yeah, she was like an heiress to a very nice beer company
Mm-hmm.
family. So they're very well off, and um there's a mismatch in temperaments with Stieglitz and his wife, but I don't know. I'm just chalking it up to him being a serial philanderer. That would
Yeah.
be disturbing.
That would be
But
really disturbing. Yeah.
yeah, especially in a Victorian society where
Mm-hmm.
you don't quite have the concept of the free love or hippie
Mm-mm.
or whatever you want to call it. There's no new age wisdom back then. So she's probably thinking hellfire and all these terrible things on top of
Well,
just the trauma emotionally.
and finding him with Georgia, and then I
Well,
guess
that's
they
the
were,
wife. That's the
yeah.
wife who finds them. But yeah,
Oh,
the
I guess they
daughter.
lived. I guess the wife and Stieglitz, they live separate lives. Apparently, I
Yeah,
don't. Yeah.
yeah, and he just moves out, and after he's discovered with Georgia by the wife in an apartment, and that's why I mentioned that she was the wealthy one, because he's kind of living in his sister's apartments and his wife's apartment while he's doing all these things.
Yes,
So
he's
he's
living
sort of
in.
he's a guy who's not working very much, and
No.
he's living off relatives' money or wife's money, and so
Yeah,
that also makes it a little
it's
uh
worse.
yeah, and so anyway, she sort of gives him an ultimatum when she discovers them, and
Hmm.
he calls her bluff and wants the divorce. And then she's devastated.
Yeah.
The wife's devastated, and so is the daughter. And
Hmm.
the daughter ends up being hospitalized, and um, but Georgia, what happens is she's sort of past the point of giving up on motherhood. And then Stieglitz has found a younger woman and is publicly spending all his time with her because she's in the gallery running it and finding um, fundraising for the gallery and running it. And she's well connected, so he kind of needs her to help promote the gallery. Um, and George is not in that picture. And then it's sort of awkward because she's not allowed to say, hey, stop philandering. Because I guess, I don't know, just old fashioned norms, I guess. She just feels like she can't bring it up. I don't know, I'm sure there's something Freudian there, but like they just never address it. Um, to
Well,
the
it's
point
kind
when Stieglitz actually dies and Georgia is there on the deathbed, she basically tells the mistress to get lost. Like the mistress
yeah.
thinks she's just going to keep being a part of his afterlife, I guess, like in public, events. She's like, no, get the hell out of here. Like you've been the worst thing to me for the last 20 years or whatever. Um, and the mistress is shocked. Like she's like, I thought we had a good relationship going on.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, but anyway, so there's a bad year when um basically Georgia feels like Stieglitz is being mean to her emotionally. He's writing nasty things about her art. And then her sisters are starting to get shows in New York, and she just feels very precarious. Um, because she feels like she could lose everything. And then she ends up checking herself into a mental asylum or a clinic or something, I guess, for
Man, oh man.
almost 2 years.
Whew.
Yeah. That's a long time, actually.
Yes.
Yeah, they kind
And
of they don't talk about that period too much. I guess it's like it's because again, it's not fiction, so we just go by um letters and you know how people are. They put the highlight reel out, right? So you're not
yeah.
going to have all the negative stuff too much.
And you know, uh, those types of institutions at that time were not nice places to be,
Ooh.
you
I
know.
think she could have left if she'd wanted to. I don't think it was like a lock and key situation,
Mhm.
but I'm not sure.
Right, right.
Um, I know that when she would get sick or upset, she would lose a lot of weight. So I don't know if
Yes,
she had an eating disorder.
right.
Um, I don't think they mentioned her being suicidal or anything, but um, I mean, I know at some point when she started to sell artwork, things started to turn a bit after this situation though, because she finds her feet, she's starting to like make more and more sales. So she has enough money to like buy a car and then she buys a house and like she learns
Mm,
to drive cross country, which Stieglitz is like totally against. And then he's getting older, so she's starting to take more like charge of her life or their life. And then she does this thing where she buys or she rents her own apartment in New York. And she's like, you can move in if you want. Like like she basically makes the first big decision in their life about where they're gonna live. And she's like, you come along if you want to, or or you could stay wherever you are. But
but he was very much like he wanted the same clothes, he wanted the
oh
same
yeah.
hat, he wanted the same barber. This everything had to
Yeah.
be the same all the time.
Yeah, she had to go around looking for like outdated pairs of
Yes,
clothing. Like it had to be exact. Yeah, there's almost like a, isn't that something certain autistic people have? Like,
yes.
um,
It
yeah,
you
it's
know, it
it,
had to be extremely predictable. Oh, sorry, had to be extremely predictable all the time.
yeah,
Um,
and that
you
was
know,
just getting to her after a
yeah,
while. I could see
yeah.
that.
I don't know. And the thing with her dress, like the way she dressed, I have read that sometimes creative people or writers and musicians, they want to spend the majority of their time doing what they love. They don't want to think about clothing. It takes a lot of time to put an outfit together,
Mm-hmm.
and they just want to have that the uniform.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if that was the case with her or not. I don't know, but I just know that a lot of creatives do that. So
Mm-hmm.
it's just easy, you know.
Yeah. Well, I
So,
think they were kind of like sculpting their sartorial image a bit to
oh,
like
true,
Frida Kahlo did, to
true.
or Dali,
Hmm.
Salvador Dali. I think part of it was like for publicity. So
Hmm.
like Stieglitz they both became known for these black capes.
Okay,
But
yes.
then I think that they also like Georgia was into these silk dresses later on, very like austere but beautiful silk dress shirts and like a belt or something.
Yes.
I think they just were creative and they came up with their own outfit and then they just didn't want to wear anything else.
Hmm.
They're like, I've got it,
That's
and
it.
then they just stuck with
That's
it.
their
Yeah, they weren't chasing trends or
right.
um, promoting the latest. hot topic
Hmm.
in fashion or something. Yeah, so I suppose you would call it a bit of branding, maybe. That's what most people
Yes.
like to say today.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, it is a bit odd, but basically Stieglitz, he didn't do anything for himself.
No.
I suppose he was what my mother would have called an old-fashioned
Hmm.
gentleman.
Yeah,
So like he wasn't going to cook, he wasn't going to clean, and he definitely wasn't going to dress himself, right? So he was just a little helpless
yeah.
in that way.
Which is weird because, like, oh, he kept talking about how, you know, he he wanted the feminist movement to take off and he was all for it and everything, but at the same time, he was very old fashioned. So,
Yeah, well, I mean, he was born in the 19th century, right?
yeah.
Like,
Hmm.
so was Georgia, but he was like probably I'll do like a quick search here. I don't think he could have helped it, to be honest.
Right, right.
I mean, that's what's so cool about these books is that I forget how old these people really were, like in history.
Well, when you look at George's work, I don't think, I don't know. It just like to me, it looks like new-ish,
He's
like
born
it,
in 1864.
wow.
Yeah. So just think about what his grandparents told him a man should behave like,
That's right.
right? Yeah.
That's right.
And when you're in the whatever you want to call the position of power, there's less incentive for you to change
That's
structural
right.
norms in society.
Hmm.
He's a white male and
That's right.
he's a privileged white male. Why would he want to why would he want to change anything? That would be
Right.
crazy.
Right. Especially when he's getting what he wants.
But yeah, that would be completely insane.
But he did cook, I guess when Georgia was working on paintings, getting ready for a show or something. He did
He
him
tried to
and
cook or
yeah,
something. Yeah,
yeah.
that's sweet. Yeah,
So
yeah.
I
That was,
don't know.
yeah, I don't. I
Crazy.
love that window to the old world, and it's like you subtly notice America changing throughout the book,
Yeah,
and but it's so subtle. It's a really fascinating read because she almost lived a century. I mean, that was well, it's also amazing. It's like the
and
world she was born into versus the world she left were like night and
and
day.
she had so many illnesses, but lived such a long time.
Yeah, yeah,
So hmm, definitely interesting.
She had a beautiful vegetable garden and fruit trees on her land in Abiquiu and consistent eating times and walking every morning, and I'm sure that helped.
True.
yeah.
Yeah. She didn't stay idle.
Yeah.
She was also against sugar, apparently. She thought sugar was bad for you, which
Who
nowadays I
knew?
know. Yeah, yeah, she was like ahead of her time. Um, one of the museums that was I think it was the Abiquiu Museum was talking about how she was like what they like to call farm to table nowadays. She was very into that kind of like clean, healthy lifestyle.
But I
Apparently
guess
she,
that's what they ate though, growing up, that's what they ate because they were on that farm. So,
mm, um, Karen, did they have these stepping stones in the garden? I read it at the beginning in Abiquiu anyway. She was only allowed to use water once a week, and she would flood the garden a foot. And so she had to create these stepping stones so that she could walk across the garden without getting wet.
Yes, they
But
were brilliant. Yeah, the full
yeah,
irrigation, beautifully. I mean, her trips to Japan probably influenced her gardening.
wow.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, I was inspired by that.
Now I have to see this. I'm gonna have to
Yeah.
look it up. That's great.
Um, what paintings are your favorite, Karen? Or what body of work would you associate with her the most? If you were to make some art thinking
Mm.
about her.
I really like the macro perspective of really getting into the form of her floral work, where it's just, it can look like mountainous, just a petal in the transition, and then I do like her stark, I'd say her work in skulls and flowers. Yeah. Um, that's kind of vague, but I really love when which was kind of revolutionary at the time. No one was doing that, right? I mean, at the time, they're like, what is this lady doing? You know,
Oh yeah, well
you
that's
like a
interesting.
bouquet of flowers, not like just totally zooming in to like what's happening, these like uni this universe within a flower that she was able to describe and the wonderment of that.
Well, there's a video. I think I put it in the links that I included. And they talk about this teacher she had, Arthur Dove, who she
Oh yeah.
felt connected to because she didn't feel connected to like the William Merritt Chase set, like
Right.
the John Singer. They don't mention John Singer Sargent, though I'm sure like that kind of art, that Gilded Age art, which would have been big in her time,
Yeah.
was very hard to do and uh was probably looking a little out of date in her youth at that point. And I think she says in the early part of the book, she's like she decided to quit painting because she's like, I just can't add to this. And she also wasn't a Europe worshiper, as they called it back then.
Right, right. Yes.
So it was a bunch of Gilded Age, which is my favorite time period, but it's a lot of like beautiful women in dresses and European like kings and nobles and fairy tales and furniture and blah blah blah, like European scenes, and then there's like Greek and Roman stuff and all that sort of thing. And she was just like not into any of it. But I think Dove had some a different take. And so I think if you look at some of his work, her work resembles it a lot, especially the abstract stuff. And then one of the things that was a problem with her and her sisters is that I think one of them was really either copying a lot of her
Oh,
flower subjects or vice versa. Like she was taking ideas from one of her sister. So it's possible one of her sisters did the big flowers first, or it's all kind of like who knows. But I wouldn't say she's the first one to do what she did. I think she's just the one who got famous for it, which is
wow.
usually the case in almost every art movement. Like take Picasso, for example.
Mm.
Or take Sargent. Like Sargent wasn't the first one to do the grand manner portraits, right? There was like Carolus Duran, his teacher, and then there was a bunch of like William Merritt Chase types, and there's like Franz Hall's doing it, and Velasquez, and like years before. So it's just like she got famous for it.
Yes.
But she definitely, that's still though, like I think in any given art movement, you have a lot of people doing similar things, and then someone gets credit for it.
That's right.
That's what I
Hmm.
believe about art history. I know that's probably
Yeah.
not a popular belief, but that's what I've seen.
Hmm.
Um, but it doesn't
Yeah.
mean that she wasn't the one coming up with the idea. She could have been, but there were a lot of people doing it.
Maybe that's why Stieglitz didn't want her to change her style. I don't know. We'll never know.
Definitely like the first female artist probably doing it. Who knows?
Yeah.
I mean, you've got those cool paintings by Hilma af Klint that were hidden away, right, for like 80 years. And uh,
Teresa, oh my gosh, can I just say this is the second weird synchronicity that's happened during this
oh,
conversation. I
tell
don't know if
us.
you can see, but this
Oh,
is who
yeah.
I'm looking at. And then it also happened when you were talking about Frida Kahlo and her friendship. I was looking at that photo.
Yeah.
Wild. So, we're almost at 5 o'clock. May I ask you both a question, regarding continuing the book
Uh-huh.
tea time? Do you have an idea for the next book yet, or will you be announcing that? How's that going to work?
Um, well, I think what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna see if anyone is gonna finish this book. And if that happens, we can have a second session
Great.
about Georgia, because I mean, obviously there's so much more to talk about.
Yeah.
And then I was thinking about what the next book could be, and I'm feeling like delving into Hieronymus Bosch would be interesting. I have a thing for his work because it's so unexplainable. And unlike Georgia O'Keeffe, it's like there's not a lot of contemporary people you can cite who are like, yeah, I worked for her, or I drove her here, or we did this, or whatever, you know what I mean?
Right,
So it's
right.
like
Yes.
he's just so lost at time, but then he's influenced so many people. And I also think, like Georgia O'Keeffe, he's very misunderstood. So where the stereotype of like Georgia O'Keeffe is like it's all purely sexual or whatever. Um, everyone thinks Hieronymus Bosch is like a maniac, but apparently he was a very well respected noble type, like upper class guy who was in a Brotherhood of the Swan, which is like some secret society that even like Queen Elizabeth was in now, and he did good works in the church, and supposedly all his subject matter came from folklore that like Dutch people would have known at that time. Medieval, especially the Middle Ages, was much more into like pictorial descriptions because you had more literates. So there were these kind of like telltale signs in his images. So his paintings are like where's Waldo's, but of things from the time. And I was interested in his work. And a few years ago, I came across a very small YouTube channel that was explaining it, and I'd never come across such a good explanation of his work. So I was like, we could maybe watch that and then talk about it. So in this case, it wouldn't be a book. So I could also suggest a book. I have a very nice Roundless Bosch book that is, I don't think it's Taitian, but it's like Taitian length. It's a big coffee table book with close-ups. So maybe we could try looking at the paintings and being, what do you think this is about? Like that could be fun, maybe.
Yeah.
Um, because
That would
there's
be
so yeah. And
um
again, trying to overcome the general, like usually people feel like it's satanic or it's drug fueled. And I'm like, okay, maybe there might be some of that, but I don't think that's an accurate description of his work. Um,
what surprised me learning a little bit about him is that he was often commissioned by the church. Like just when I
Hmm.
first saw his images, I
Hmm.
thought he was celebrating debauchery, like,
exactly. Yeah.
and really they were cautionary pieces of like, this is what it could look like,
Yeah.
and he was super reverent and super respected, like you said.
Mm.
Um, have you taken a look at there's a Bosch project or an online museum where you can look at his underpaintings. They've done like x-rays of it and you can see underneath and you can understand his process.
Oh no, share that with us. Maybe email
Yeah,
that to me, and
I will.
I could
Yeah,
get out a reading list earlier. That way everyone could have time to
yeah.
go through it.
It's incredible. You can zoom in and yeah, amazing. But
He's
yeah,
he's affected me. Oh, sorry, he's affected me in a lot of ways. Like just thinking of one. Like I was at the zoo the other day with a friend, and they were owls. They were barred owls at the zoo, and I was like, back in the day, those were seen as the sign of evil. Like nowadays, we think of them as wisdom, and the ancient Greeks thought of them as wisdom too. But the Middle Ages, they were Satan. Like isn't it cool how meanings change in different
Wow.
eras? And I love that in art, how visual things can, like the same with flowers, like they can have multiple meanings, colors can have multiple meanings in different cultures or different time periods. And I think that's one of the cool things about being a painter because you have the potential to draw from different time periods and cultures and mix them together, and they like have a dialogue with each other in one painting. So it's like a little bit of time travel, a little bit of alchemy going on in art or sculpture too. I mean, not just painting, but like anything in the visual. I just think that that's really cool, and that would be interesting to talk about.
yeah. So this website, it's interactive. You can go into particular paintings that they've taken x-rays
So
of.
cool.
Pretty stunning
Yeah.
to see his underpaintings. Um, Teresa knows I'm very interested in UFOs
Oh.
and near-death experiences. And
Yeah.
the one triptych that he did,
Hmm.
um, where the angels are escorting the soul into the
Hmm.
tunnel of light,
Mhm.
is riveting. It's like it makes you wonder if he was some kind of an experiencer and had all sorts of access to altered states of consciousness. And, some of the
Yeah.
imagery is a little bit suspicious, these objects flying in the air and people riding them. And, there's all sorts of visiting imagery way back from hundreds and hundreds of years ago. Some of the paintings belong to the Vatican of what are these objects in the air, this phenomenon
Oh,
works
yeah.
Wow.
in describing as angels,
Hmm.
that maybe were these paranormal visitations, but their language and the culture at the time, they saw angels. It depends on what your
Yes.
beliefs are at
Yes.
the time is what you see.
Right.
Yeah.
Reality is so subjective based on our history and
Hmm.
experiences. But anyway, I would love to learn more about Hieronymus Bosch as a group.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a great
Very
idea. Yeah.
cool.
Yeah, because with these sort of sessions, I'm more interested in hearing about how artists are viewing the art and how we would use it in our own art or takeaways we have. And I don't always, it's like I was saying, I don't need the stereotypical opinion or the academic opinion. It's like the the problem with the stereotypical opinion is like it just prevents people from thinking further. And then the
Hmm.
academic one is like, I'm afraid to say anything wrong. So
Right.
we can't
Right.
speculate. So I just want to speculate. I want to like stream of consciousness, maybe like discover new areas of interest. So that's perfect. Actually, that sounds like a good one for that.
Nice.
Um,
Nice. Love
Yeah,
it.
yeah,
with all the new teachings or discoveries about the Egyptian pyramid and what they've discovered underneath the pyramids. Are you guys aware of that? That they're thinking that it was an energy conductor, some
yeah. I
kind of,
saw like some headlines. I haven't watched any of like longer videos, but yeah, they found very long coils. Was it
yeah,
under the
really
Giza
long
pyramid?
coils. And they're thinking, I mean, they're just not sure how these big boulders were moved, if it's like through telepathy or, like if aliens visited or were assisted or what, like the older pyramids were built in a different way than the newer.
Yeah, yeah, that's fascinating. I was about to ask. I was like, I bet it wasn't the new ones that have the coils
Yeah,
in, right? Like,
no,
right? It's like the new ones are imitations of the old ones, but with less
right.
engineering skill and quality and um just
Be-
like fakes almost.
Yeah,
Like
because
above the surface they look the same, but below they're or
yeah.
inside they're different. Yeah, I love that.
So in my UFO sensory groups, they're just thinking that they were visited at that time and they were assisted, and then later they tried to replicate that, and they don't have the endurance that these original pyramids had,
Oh,
built the same.
Wow.
So anyway, and then, like as far as ceremonial and rituals and all I mean, they were just so connected with the cosmos and everything related to that. And I'm like, oh, I want to check it out. And I went on I think it was like a Harvard lecture. And it was like listening to this man talk about it. It was so stripped away of any juiciness or any spirit or soul. It was just so like, ugh, I just can't see
Awful.
that academic perspective. So, yeah. So, anyway, Teresa, I appreciate you wanting to have artists talk about art.
Yeah.
yeah, yeah, because I that would
What a
happen like
concept.
yeah, well, and it's nice if you're like a practicing artist and you've also been sort of frustrated by like not a dead end, but like you read a biography or you listen to a talk and you're like, but I want to hear more speculation, but it's like it's artists who are supposed to be making those speculations, I think,
That's right.
because
That's
we're
right.
just making the pretty pictures, right? We're not going to get fired from our teaching job if we say something wrong or whatever.
Right.
So I don't know.
True, true.
I just think it's I don't know. I love listening to museum talks and academic lectures, but I want to combine it all. And when it comes to creating artwork, it's definitely like a lot of it comes from like um, the subconscious or wondering about things and or conversations like this. So
Definitely.
I'm trying to just like, delve into that a bit more. And yeah, it does seem like a good idea to be looking at historical subjects,
Yeah.
uh, partly because they're dead, and it's sort of like from a safe distance, and then we understand the past better that way. So it just seems like a good idea.
Definitely. Good idea.
I love it. Thank you.
Cool.
Wonderful time, Sharon. Nice to
Oh, it's good to
meet
meet
you and
you.
watch you paint, both of you.
Yes.
Just a
Uh,
delight.
I'm good. I have to look up your work.
Yeah, it's at Kara Montgomery 7 on
Okay.
Instagram. I
Okay.
need to post more. I'm old fashioned. I'm with Georgia.
No, you're not. No, you're not.
But yeah, I'm inspired to put my stuff out there. But
Yeah.
anyway, I look forward to the next tea time
Yeah.
and discussion with
So
both of
much fun.
Yay.
you.
Yeah, well,
Okay.
yeah,
Thanks for
Karen does
joining us.
beautiful sculptures, and hers have multimedia elements too, which is nice.
Oh
'Cause I
my
think a lot of
gosh. So
sculpture,
great.
it's like it has to be pure
Yeah.
clay
That's
or
so great.
marble, bronze, but she's got multimedia. It's really fascinating,
Very creative.
very beautiful. All
Okay.
right.
Well, have a lovely evening.
Thank you. You too. See you soon.
Bye.
Bye bye.
Bye.